Breaking. Zimbabwe has entered a new political chapter, and the country may never be the same again. After months of heated debates, emotional arguments, and growing political tension, President Emmerson Mnangagwa has officially signed the Constitution of Zimbabwe Amendment Act No. 3, 2026 into law. The legislation had already cleared both the National Assembly and the Senate, but with the president's signature and its publication in the government gazette, the constitutional changes have now formally taken effect. The development marks one of the most significant constitutional reforms in Zimbabwe's recent history and has immediately triggered strong reactions from supporters, critics, legal experts, and ordinary citizens. Stay with us because we'll break down what happened, the major changes introduced by the new law, and why this moment is likely to shape Zimbabwe's political future for years to come. For months, Constitutional Amendment Number 3 dominated national headlines. It sparked intense debates inside Parliament, across political parties, among churches, civil society organizations, and ordinary Zimbabweans. Supporters argued the reforms would strengthen governance, improve institutional efficiency, and provide long-term political stability. Critics, however, warned that the proposed changes would fundamentally reshape Zimbabwe's democratic framework and should not proceed without broader public approval. Now, that debate has moved into a new phase. The bill is no longer just a proposal. It is now the law. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe for the latest Zimbabwe political news and analysis. We bring you every major development as it happens. Also tell us in the comments where you're watching from today. Are you watching from Zimbabwe, South Africa, Botswana, the United Kingdom, the United States, Australia, Canada, or somewhere else around the world? We'd love to know where our viewers are joining us from. One of the most talked about changes is the new system for electing the president. Under the new law, the president will no longer be chosen through a direct nationwide popular vote. Instead, the legislation provides for the president to be elected through a parliamentary process conducted by a joint sitting of parliament. This is one of the reforms that has generated the most public discussion because it changes how Zimbabwe's head of state is selected. Another major change concerns the length of terms in office. The Act extends the terms of office for the President and members of Parliament from 5 years to 7 years. Supporters argue this provides greater continuity for long-term national planning and development, while critics contend it significantly alters Zimbabwe's existing constitutional framework. The legislation also introduces changes affecting the Attorney General. Under the new provisions, the Attorney General must now possess qualifications equivalent to those required for appointment as a judge of the Supreme Court. Supporters say this strengthens the legal standards expected for one of the country's most important constitutional offices. Another significant amendment expands the Senate. The president will now have the authority to appoint 10 additional senators, increasing Senate membership from 80 to 90 members. Government supporters say this creates opportunities to include people with specialized expertise and professional experience in parliament. Critics, however, have questioned how the expanded appointments could affect the balance within the upper house. Electoral administration has also changed under the new law. Responsibility for voter registration shifts from the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission to the Registrar General, while constituency and ward boundary delimitation is assigned to a newly established Delimitation Commission. These changes have become another major point of national debate because they affect how future elections will be administered. The judiciary has not been left untouched. Public interviews for judicial appointments have been removed under the new legislation, another reform that has attracted attention from legal commentators and constitutional experts. In addition, the Act creates the new office of Judge President of the Supreme Court and expands the Constitutional Court's authority to hear certain appeals involving important questions of law when leave to appeal has been granted. The law also introduces provisions governing presidential succession. If the office of president becomes vacant, a vice president will serve as acting president until parliament elects a replacement within 30 days. Supporters describe this as creating greater constitutional certainty during transitions, while opponents continue debating the wider implications of the broader reforms. Across Zimbabwe, reactions are already pouring in. Supporters of the legislation say this is a historic milestone that will strengthen governance, improve institutional stability, and support the country's long-term development agenda. They argue that Parliament followed the constitutional legislative process before the President assented to the Act. Opposition parties, constitutional activists, and several civil society organizations have maintained their objections, arguing that some of the changes required broader public participation or even a referendum. Some groups had challenged aspects of the bill in court before it was signed, and constitutional debate around the reforms is likely to continue. Political analysts say Zimbabwe has entered a completely new constitutional era. Whether viewed as necessary reforms or controversial changes, Constitutional Amendment Act No. 3 will almost certainly influence the country's political landscape, electoral system, and governance structures for years to come. For ordinary Zimbabweans, many questions now remain. How will these constitutional changes be implemented? What practical effects will citizens notice? How will future elections operate under the new legal framework? And what impact will these reforms have on Zimbabwe's democracy, institutions, and national development? Those questions are likely to dominate political discussion for months, if not years. One thing, however, is beyond dispute. The long parliamentary journey has ended. The president has signed the legislation. The act has been gazetted, and Zimbabwe has officially entered a new constitutional chapter. Whether history ultimately remembers this moment as a turning point for stronger governance or as one of the country's most controversial constitutional changes will depend not only on the words written into law, but also on how those changes are implemented and experienced by Zimbabweans in the years ahead. What do you think about these constitutional changes? Share your thoughts in the comments below.